Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
It's been a while since I've done a story about Carvana. It's not that Carvana is not in the news. Carvana is in the news so much that, ironically, it's not news when they are. But a whole bunch of people sent me this story because it involves not just Carvana, but other things I like to talk about. And the story's from carscoops.com. Brad Anderson wrote it. Carvana customer forced to return Corolla over a year later due to mileage discrepancy. And a year later means a year later after he purchased it from Carvana. And they said it was due to a mileage discrepancy in the paperwork filed with the state. Now, there's some problems with this story. Not in the way that Brad Anderson wrote it. It's a fabulous story the way he wrote it. But the story that's being told to this customer doesn't quite add up. So we'll take a look at this. Officials in Texas would not renew the registration on the Corolla because of an inconsistency with its mileage, So Carvana, of course, was a big deal in the used car industry that once boasted a share price of over $360, now trading just a bit over $7 a share. They often make mistakes that get them in the news, which explains why I talk about them so often. And here's a case involving a guy who in 2021 purchased a 2015 Toyota Corolla in Texas for about $19,000. Took out a loan at 4.3% interest, which actually plays into the story. It was advertised as having 13,331 miles. 13,331, and that was stated as actual mileage on the odometer. After he took delivery of it, the man proceeded to drive it for all of 2022 without issue. But when he went to renew the registration with the state, he discovered that there had been a hold on the car's title the entire time he had owned it, which is strange because when you buy a vehicle and they do the paperwork and they send it to you, you think you'd notice there's a problem with it, but it appears they didn't send him the stuff. And one of the problems we keep hearing about with Carvana is that when you buy a vehicle through a licensed car dealer, such as Carvana, they do the paperwork for you. You don't often go to the Secretary of State's office or DMV on that transaction. It's the later transactions where you go in. So presumably, Carvana handled the paperwork for him, gave him the paperwork, he drove off in the car, and it wasn't until he started dealing with the state that he discovered there was a problem with it. So the Harris County Tax Office in Texas denied his request to renew his registration, revealing that the Corolla's stated odometer reading did not match what it had on record. The letter they sent him revealed that the odometer reading had dropped. At one point, it had been 22,000 miles, and then it dropped to 13,000. So somewhere, 9,000 miles fell off the car. The odometer reading went down from 22,756 to 13,343, reads the denial letter from the Harris County Tax Office. While trying to resolve this issue with Carvana, the buyer was informed that the Corolla was sold to him with the correct mileage, but that the old mileage was listed on the car's title due to a clerical error, and they won't be able to fix it. They said they missed it like they did the title they wrote wrong. That's what they told me, he said, and added that Carvana referred to it as a typo, a typo, and not typographical error. He expressed his frustration, saying, I was driving the car like it was illegal. That's what it was, with no registration. Now, here's the thing. A typographical error can be fixed by the Secretary of State's office or the DMV or the tax office. These things happen. As you can imagine, typographical errors happen all the time. So to suggest that someone made a typographical error and therefore this car can never be sold again doesn't quite hold water. Unable to register the car, Carvana took the Corolla back from him, paid off the rest of his loan, and returned his down payment. So apparently they bought the car back from him, and he's been made whole as far as that part of the transaction goes. However, because of inflation, while he's searching for a new car to replace this one, a new used car for him, the most competitive interest rate he can find now is 6% higher than the one he got before. So that means that he might get soaked on his car payments. TV station that covered the story notes that Carvana has offered to pay $1,000 to help cover the expenses of the more costly loan. Carvana says back in 2021, we listed this vehicle with the correct mileage, and the customer paid the appropriate amount as it was accurately advertised. Unfortunately, the paper title showed a discrepancy due to a clerical error, and we are compensating him to make it right considering the hassle he's experienced in this rare instance. Question I have for you is, if you took the car back and the odometer discrepancy cannot be fixed, what are you going to do with the car? What's going to happen with that car? And so if you said, Steve, what do you think happened here? Well, I think it's pretty obvious what happened here. And it does happen. People will buy a car, and the odometer reading on the paperwork is lower than it ought to be because somewhere along the line, mileage fell off the car. And what happens when a DMV or agency notifies you of that is they'll just say, by the way, there's a mileage discrepancy. They'll put in the title, mileage unknown, mileage inaccurate, something to that effect. But the car can still be driven. It's just that they won't be a party to you trying to say that the mileage has gone backwards on your car. And so I've had clients before who've bought cars and the Carfax or something kicks back and says, oh, the mileage went backwards at one point in time. And there's statutes on this. Most states have got them, but there's also a federal odometer statute. And if somebody sells you a car with a rolled odometer or any of the variety of things that can happen to cause mileage to fall off a car, you can go after them and sue them for it and get damages. So if this man accepts the $1,000 and moves on with his life, he might be happy with that. But there are some people out there who would have said, gee, if you'd gone to an attorney who handles odometer rollback cases, you could possibly have handled this a little differently. Now, I'll admit, I'm not sure how that works in Texas. Some states have got very good odometer statutes, some states not so much. But there you go. But they're claiming it's due to a typographical error. And I've mentioned before, I've got friends who are car dealers. I've actually got friends in the business who are car dealers and also car brokers. And I assure you that if a document gets filed with a state that's got a typographical error in it can be corrected. And I know that for an absolute fact because I bought a vehicle through a friend of mine who is a dealer, and it got submitted with a typographical error. And the error was not involving the mileage, but it was something that was extremely easy to understand as to what had happened. And somebody was reading a series of figures from a vehicle identification number, which is 17 digits of letters and numbers, and accidentally saw one number and wrote it as a letter. And it was a number and a letter that look alike. And the paperwork got filed with the state, and very, very strange how I caught it, but I noticed there's a problem, and I called my friend up and said, I think this paperwork got done wrong. And he looked at it, he's like, oh, you're right. And he filed the papers to correct it, and I got it corrected. And so I've seen corrections made. Typographical errors don't destroy cars. I mean, it's just interesting that they make the argument and expect people to go, oh, okay, yeah, sure. You guys made a typographical error, therefore you'll buy the car back. I assure you, I've had clients who've had bigger things wrong with their cars that the dealerships wouldn't buy back, and yet they'll buy one back because of a typographical error made in the purchase documents. Seems kind of strange to me, but hey, then again, anything is possible, right? So the story was sent to me by basically everybody on the face of the planet, and I appreciate that. So from carscoops.com and Brad Anderson, an unlikely story out of Texas, but Carvana customer forced to return Corolla over a year later due to a mileage discrepancy described by Carvana as a typographical error. A typographical error. And if you believe that, well, there you go. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Often out of periods of losing come the greatest strivings towards a new winning streak.